All right, buckle up, everybody, because we are diving deep today
Into?
into the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Yeah.
And this is one that's been going on for a while,
Yeah.
and it's as complex
Yeah,
as it
it's
is
strong.
tragic.
Yeah. And
You've sent in some fascinating excerpts that really dig into
they do.
the historical roots of this conflict,
Yeah, and we'll get into
what the future might
sure.
hold,
Yeah.
especially with all the political stuff going on in the U.S. and Germany.
Oh, yeah. It's, it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
It really is.
Yeah.
So how did we get to this point?
Yeah.
What role did that annexation of Crimea play?
Well, that's a good question.
And what could happen with
Well,
different potential leaders?
yeah, leaders in the U.S. and Germany.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to...
There's a lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack, yeah.
But that's why we're here, right?
That's right. That's why we do these deep dives.
Exactly.
To get into these really, really complex and really important issues
Yeah.
that are facing the world today.
So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
We'll start with the history because that seems
Well, it's always good
really good to start with the history.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial
So
to
the source material
understand.
really highlights this
Yeah.
long-standing tension between Ukraine and Moscow.
Long-standing, yeah.
Even going back to the Soviet era.
That's right. That's right. And, I think it's important to understand that this tension, it really stems from an idea, like a pattern of conflict.
A pattern of conflict, and it stems from Russia viewing, Ukraine as essential to its own security and identity.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. And this goes way back, even before the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
They've always had this idea that Ukraine is somehow
A part of them.
part of them, or at least that they have some right to control it, influence it.
Even after independence in 91?
That's right. Even after 91, I think they still had this idea that they had some, special relationship with Ukraine and that they should have a say in what happens there.
So fast forward to 2014 and those
14.
Euromaidan protests.
Big year.
Yanukovych gets ousted.
Yeah.
What was the significance of all that?
Well, Yanukovych, he was very pro-Russian.
Okay.
So when he was ousted, Russia saw this as a direct threat to its interests, right? They saw it as a Western-backed coup designed to, pull Ukraine away from its sphere of influence.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal. So that's
why they reacted so strongly with...
That's a big part of why they reacted so strongly with the annexation of Crimea.
Crimea,
which, of course, is a
peninsula
peninsula with a majority Russian-speaking population.
Right.
So, they felt like they had a pretext to go in there.
So that annexation really did send shockwaves
It did.
across the world.
Absolutely.
And it triggered sanctions, right?
Big time.
Against Russia.
Yeah, there were some pretty serious sanctions,
That's what kind?
They targeted key sectors of the Russian economy.
Oh, wow.
Like their energy exports, financial institutions, access to technology, all sorts of stuff.
Oh, the goal being to get them to...
The goal was to pressure them
change.
to change course, yeah.
Okay. But even with that,
But
it didn't stop there, did it?
no,
We also have the war in Donbass starting that same year.
2014.
It all kind of kicked off.
Are those two things connected?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think,
yeah.
The annexation of Crimea,
Yeah.
it really emboldened
Okay.
pro-Russian separatists in the Donbass region,
Right.
which is in eastern Ukraine.
Right.
And they saw what happened in Crimea, and they thought, well,
We could do that too.
we could do that too, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and of course, they had Russia's support.
So it was sort of a...
What's interesting is that during this period, Russia really employed this hybrid warfare strategy.
What does that mean?
Well, they combined conventional military tactics with disinformation campaigns,
Okay.
cyber attacks.
Interesting.
So it was this kind of, multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
And, in a way, it was kind of a testing ground
Testing ground
for what we would see later
Okay.
in 2022
So the
with the full-scale invasion.
tactics that they were...
Yeah, the tactics and strategies they honed in Donbass.
Right.
The way they blended military force with propaganda, with these destabilization efforts.
Right.
All of that would come into play in a much bigger way when they launched a full-scale invasion in 2022.
Yeah, 2022. I remember I was watching the news and I couldn't...
Yeah, believe it.
Nobody could believe
When those Russian troops
Yeah, I was just...
crossed the border.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Absolutely.
And then Putin gives that speech
the speech.
about demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine.
I mean, what did you think when you heard that?
I don't know. I was...
I know a lot of
I was kind of speechless. I was just like, is this
including myself, I think,
really happening?
And we saw those claims as kind of thinly veiled pretexts
Right.
for an invasion that had been planned for a long time.
Like he'd already made up his mind.
Oh, absolutely.
This was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he had been building up this narrative for years, right?
Yeah.
This whole idea that Ukraine was a hotbed of neo-Nazism and a threat to Russia's security.
So was that all just...
I mean, it was all
part of a larger strategy then?
part of a larger strategy to justify the invasion.
Like to the
Russian people and to the international community.
Yeah.
To try to make it seem like
he had a good reason.
Like he had a legitimate reason.
To do this.
I mean, yeah.
And how did the West respond to all this?
Well, I mean, their response was swift.
Right.
And severe.
Right.
We saw an unprecedented level of sanctions.
Wow.
Targeting even more sectors of the Russian economy than before.
Okay.
Plus a massive influx of military aid to Ukraine,
So like...
weapons, intelligence, training, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, and that aid's been a big factor.
Oh,
In
absolutely.
how Ukraine's been able to defend itself.
It has been huge. I mean,
They've held off the Russians.
yeah.
Much better than a lot of experts predicted, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, underestimated the strength of the Ukrainian resistance.
Yeah.
And the effectiveness of the Western support.
Okay.
Remember early on, many were predicting a swift Russian victory.
Right.
Right? Everybody thought it was going to be over in a matter of days.
Yeah,
But instead, it's turned into this grinding war of attrition.
War of attrition? What does that mean?
Well, it's basically a prolonged conflict.
Okay.
Where each side tries to wear the other down.
Okay.
Through continuous attacks and just, steady depletion of resources.
So just
it's a brutal way to fight a war.
Just a constant back and forth.
Yeah, a back and forth. And it's costly in terms of both human life and material resources.
Right, and that brings us to...
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we are now, right?
Yeah. And
the conflict is still raging on and nobody knows...
It's hard to see the end.
How it's going to end or when it's going to end.
Yeah.
And
the source material you sent focused on some key political developments.
Oh, yeah.
That could impact all this.
That could have a huge impact.
Yeah.
I think, the two biggest factors that we need to think about are the possibility of a second Trump presidency in the U.S.
Right.
And the upcoming elections in Germany.
Okay.
Both of those events could dramatically alter the whole landscape of this conflict.
That's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
So let's break those down then.
Let's do it.
So let's start with the U.S. then. Trump's made some...
Oh, yeah, he's...
pretty contradictory statements about the war, right?
Yeah, he's all over the place.
On the one hand, he praises Putin.
Right.
But on the other, he takes credit for arming Ukraine when he was president.
Yeah, I mean...
So what do you make of all that?
Well, it's definitely a mixed bag, and I think it's safe to say that Trump's approach to foreign policy is often unpredictable.
Okay.
And is driven more by personal relationships
Yeah.
than by any kind of long-term...
Like he just does whatever he feels like.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
He plays it by ear.
So how could a second Trump presidency
Right.
impact U.S. involvement in the war?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But based on his past actions
Right.
and what he said, his rhetoric,
Yeah.
I think we can imagine 3 broad scenarios.
Okay, give us.
So the first scenario
Scenario 1.
is that he decides
Okay.
to significantly reduce or even completely withdraw.
Like pull out completely.
Yeah, pull out completely.
Wow.
U.S. military and financial aid to Ukraine.
And that would be
I mean, that would be a major blow.
a huge blow to Ukraine.
Yeah, to their war effort.
Yeah.
And it could, embolden Russia.
Make them feel like
to escalate their offense.
they can get away with more.
Exactly. Okay, so that's
scenario 1.
not a great scenario.
Not great. How great?
What about number 2?
Okay, so scenario 2 is, Trump...
Mr. Deal Maker.
Yeah, sees himself as the ultimate deal maker, right?
Right.
So he tries to broker a peace agreement
Okay.
between Russia and Ukraine. But would it be a fair deal?
Well, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, given his past praise of Putin,
Right.
there's a real concern that he might pressure Ukraine
Okay.
into accepting a deal that really favors Russia.
Oh, so they get the better end of the deal.
Yeah, basically, potentially sacrificing
Yeah.
Ukrainian territory or sovereignty in the process.
That's not good.
So, I mean, not ideal.
So not a good peace for everybody involved.
Not really, no.
Okay, and what's the third scenario?
Okay, so the third possibility is that Trump basically focuses on shifting the burden of supporting Ukraine onto Europe.
So he's like
He's basically saying, hey, you guys got to do more.
Yeah, like you're not doing enough.
Yeah, you're not pulling your weight.
Okay.
He's criticized European countries in the past
Yeah.
for not spending enough on defense.
Right.
And he might use this as leverage to pressure them.
To pony up.
Yeah, to take on a larger role in funding and equipping Ukraine.
But couldn't that cause some problems?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this could create tensions within NATO, within the EU, particularly if some countries are, unwilling or unable to meet Trump's demands.
So it's
a tricky situation.
Tricky situation all around.
Yeah, there are no easy answers here.
Yeah, so each scenario presents its own...
Yeah, each one has its own
challenges
and risks.
Right, and then we have the German elections, too.
Oh, right, Germany, yeah.
Which is another...
That's a big one.
Big factor.
Yeah.
Germany has been a key player.
They have been, yeah.
In supporting Ukraine.
Both politically and economically.
Right.
They've provided a lot of military aid.
Yeah.
And they've also been, a driving force behind the sanctions against Russia.
But the elections could change that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the upcoming elections could shift that dynamic significantly.
In what way? What are the main...
Well, there are a couple of possibilities.
Okay.
So if a pro-Ukraine government comes to power, then we're likely to see a continuation of Germany's current policies, which is, good news for Ukraine.
Yeah.
But even then, maintaining that level of support, especially if the U.S. scales back its involvement, could be a heavy lift for Germany.
Yeah, like they both
politically and economic.
Carrying a lot of the weight.
Exactly.
And what if a government that's not so supportive of Ukraine?
Yeah, that's the other possibility.
Gets elected.
And it's one that's causing a lot of anxiety in Ukraine and among its allies.
Yeah.
Because if a less supportive government comes to power, we could see Germany reducing its aid, pushing for a quick peace settlement that favors Russia, or even blocking some of the EU sanctions. I mean, it's a
lot hinges on
these elections.
Those elections.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've got the U.S. elections, we've got the German elections.
Two big wild cards.
Both of those could reshape this whole conflict.
Absolutely. It's a lot to absorb.
It really is. And that's not even considering what's happening within Ukraine itself.
Right. We've been focusing on the external factors.
Yeah.
But the internal dynamics are just as important.
Yeah.
I mean, the resilience of the Ukrainian people,
their
determination to defend their country, that's a key factor that shouldn't be underestimated.
That's such an important point.
It is.
It's inspiring.
Yeah, it's truly an inspiring story of resistance.
But it must also be...
incredibly hard.
Yeah, to keep fighting.
To keep fighting with so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
About the future.
And I know the sources you sent in explored some possible...
some long-term
scenarios
for the war.
Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. So the first scenario is what's often referred to as a frozen conflict.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it can be a little confusing.
What it means in practice.
Yeah, so basically it's a situation where the fighting stops.
Okay.
But there's no formal peace agreement.
So it just kind of...
Yeah, it just kind of rights to a halt.
Okay.
But the underlying issues are never really resolved.
So imagine...
Yeah, so imagine a scenario where the front lines solidify.
Okay.
Neither side is making any significant advances.
Mm-hmm.
But neither side is willing to back down either.
So they're just stuck.
Yeah, they're just
like a stalemate.
Yeah, exactly, like a stalemate.
And we see that in other places, right?
Oh, yeah, we see this in places like Transnistria in Moldova. Or Abkhazia in Georgia.
So they're just kind of...
Yeah, it's like this perpetual state.
Perpetual limbo.
Limbo, yeah, exactly.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean...
for the people.
It means living in a constant state of uncertainty and insecurity.
Yeah.
The threat of renewed violence is always there.
Right.
And basic services.
Yeah.
Like healthcare and education can be severely disrupted.
That makes sense.
Plus, there's often a lack of economic opportunities.
Yeah, because who wants to invest?
Right, exactly. Who wants to invest in a place where...
in a place where who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, where there's this constant threat of war hanging over your head.
So it's not really peace then?
No, it's not really peace.
It's just kind of a...
it's just a prolonged state of tension and hardship.
Okay, so that's one scenario.
That's one scenario.
What about
Russia winning outright? Right, so that's the second scenario.
Okay.
A Russian victory.
Is it a possibility?
It's definitely a possibility,
Okay.
although I think it's become less likely as the war has dragged on.
Right.
And Ukraine has demonstrated its ability to resist.
Yeah, they've been pretty tough.
They have been incredibly tough.
Yeah.
But, if Western support for Ukraine were to dwindle significantly, and Russia were to maintain its military commitment, they might be able to overwhelm Ukrainian forces and achieve their territorial objectives.
What would those be? What are they?
Well, it's hard to say for sure,
Right.
but I think it's safe to assume that Russia would want to at least control the entire Donbas region
Okay.
and create a land bridge to Crimea.
So they'd want to connect.
Yeah, connect those two areas.
Okay.
They might even push further west towards Odessa.
And Odessa is a
Odessa is a major port city.
port city.
Yeah, on the Black Sea.
So they'd cut off Ukraine from the Black Sea.
Exactly.
That would be
I mean, that would be a devastating
a huge
outcome for Ukraine, yeah.
So what about a Ukrainian victory?
Right, so that's the third scenario.
Either Ukrainian
breakthrough.
Is there any hope for that?
There's always hope, right?
Right.
I mean, if Ukraine continues to receive robust military and economic support from the West,
okay,
and if they can maintain that high morale and fighting spirit that they've shown so far.
Which has been amazing.
Oh, it's been incredible.
Yeah.
Then yes, I think they could potentially push Russia back.
Wow.
And regain control of their lost territories.
So it really depends.
It really depends.
On the West.
On that continued Western support.
Staying involved.
Exactly.
And that's why those elections we talked about.
Right, right. That's why those elections are so crucial.
Or so important.
Because they could determine whether Ukraine gets the support it needs to push back against Russia, or whether it's forced to accept a less favorable outcome.
So we've got these three scenarios. Frozen conflict, Russian victory, Ukrainian victory. It all just seems
so
uncertain.
It's hard to know what to expect.
Does anything stand out to you as being...
I think what strikes me the most
particularly likely
is just the sheer complexity of the situation.
There's just so much.
I mean, there are so many moving parts.
Going on.
So many actors with different interests and goals that it's almost impossible to predict with any certainty what the future holds.
And it makes me think about the human cost of all this.
Absolutely.
You know, behind all the politics and the strategy.
The strategic calculations.
There are millions of people whose lives have been
billions of people whose lives have been turned upside down.
It's a tragedy.
It is. It is a tragedy.
And the impact, it goes way beyond Ukraine.
It does. It goes way beyond.
We see it in food prices.
Yeah, we're seeing the ripple effects.
Energy prices, refugees.
In terms of global food security, energy prices, the displacement of refugees.
It's a global crisis.
It is. It's a truly global crisis.
And it's a reminder that
it is.
What happens in one part of the world can really affect everybody.
Absolutely. It can have profound consequences for everyone, everywhere.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
But I think these conversations are so important.
I agree. I think it's important.
We need to try to understand this conflict.
To try to understand.
Yeah, to empathize.
To empathize with those who are suffering.
With the people going through it.
Absolutely.
And think about what role we can play.
What role we can play in promoting peace and justice.
Exactly.
It's so easy to feel overwhelmed.
It is. It is.
You know, by the scale of the problem.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
So like what? What are...
Well, for starters, staying informed is crucial.
Staying informed, so...
Yeah, don't just rely on headlines or social media snippets.
Yeah.
You know, seek out in-depth reporting.
Like, actually do some research.
Do some research, read different perspectives, challenge your own assumptions. Don't just stay in your echo chamber.
Stay in your bubble.
Get out there and really try to understand.
Okay, education is key.
Yeah, education is definitely key.
What else can people do?
Well, another important step is to engage in thoughtful conversations.
Yes.
With friends, family, colleagues.
Even strangers.
Even strangers, yeah.
Okay.
You know, don't be afraid to talk about this conflict.
Yeah.
To share your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And to listen to others.
Even if you disagree with them.
Yeah, even if you disagree. Because I think we can learn so much from each other.
Right.
And these conversations can help raise awareness.
Yeah.
And promote understanding.
It's about building bridges.
It is. It is about building bridges.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard. Even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and for those who are able... Think about supporting humanitarian organizations.
Yeah, the organizations that are working on the ground to help those affected by the war.
Like donations.
Yeah, donations, volunteering. Even just spreading the word.
Spreading the word, yeah.
About these organizations. It can all make a difference.
And there are so many.
There are so many organizations out there.
Organizations doing good work.
Doing incredible work.
Yeah.
Providing essential aid, you know, medical supplies, food, shelter, psychological support.
It's important to...
It is.
To help those in need.
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah.
You know, the people of Ukraine, they're facing unimaginable hardship.
Yeah, and we have to.
And it's our responsibility.
Show compassion.
To show compassion, to offer support.
And try to build a future.
And to work towards a future where these kinds of conflicts are a thing of the past.
Those are powerful words.
Well, thank you.
I think on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this...
This deep dive.
Deep dive?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does make you think.
Yeah. About the bigger picture.
And I'm always blown away, And, by the knowledge our listeners have,
Yeah, they're amazing.
the sources they send in, it's really
incredible.
It's amazing. So to the listener who sent these in,
To our listener, yeah.
thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
It's been great to dive into this.
To really explore this topic
Yeah.
in such depth.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
What's the takeaway for our listener?
For anyone who's really trying to wrap their head around this.
Trying to understand all this, yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is that this is a situation that demands our attention.
Like we can't...
It's not something we can just tune out.
Right.
Hope it'll magically resolve itself.
Pretend it's not happening.
Yeah, the stakes are just too high.
Way too high.
Not just for Ukraine and Russia.
Right.
But for the entire world.
So what can people do?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to feel powerless, right?
Oh, yeah.
In the face of such a massive crisis.
Like, what can one person do?
But I truly believe that even small actions can contribute to positive change.
Like, give us some
examples.
Well, for starters, staying informed is crucial.
Okay.
Don't just rely on headlines
Yeah.
or social media snippets.
Right. Actually do some research.
Yeah, do some research.
Okay.
Seek out in-depth reporting from reputable sources.
Yeah,
reliable sources. See
Yep,
different
it's
perspectives.
just stuck in your... Yeah, don't just stay in your echo chamber.
Yeah, in your bubble.
Get out there.
Okay.
And try to, understand different viewpoints.
So education is key.
Education is key. Absolutely.
What else?
Another important step is to engage in thoughtful conversations.
Okay.
With friends, family, colleagues.
Even strangers.
Even strangers. Yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to talk about this.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
And listen to others.
Even if you disagree.
Even if you disagree.
Okay.
Because,
yeah.
I think we can learn a lot from each other.
Okay.
And these conversations can help raise awareness.
Right.
Promote understanding.
Well, it's about
building bridges.
building bridges, yeah.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's tough.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Okay.
And then for those who are able, consider supporting humanitarian organizations.
Okay, so like donating.
Yeah, donating, volunteering.
Volunteering, yeah.
Even just spreading the word.
Spreading the word about these organizations.
Exactly, because they're doing really important work.
And there are so many of them.
There are tons of organizations out there,
yeah.
Providing essential aid, medical supplies, food, shelter, psychological support, the whole 9 yards.
Essentials. Yeah, so it's important to help.
I think ultimately it comes down to recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah.
The people of Ukraine.
They're going through
They're going through something unimaginable.
Yeah.
And I think it's our responsibility to show compassion.
To show compassion, to offer support.
Offer support.
And to work towards a better future.
And to work towards a future where these kinds of conflicts are a thing of the past.
That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
So to our listener, thank you again for these incredible sources.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And to everyone out there, please stay engaged, stay informed.
Stay hopeful.
And stay hopeful. The path to peace might be long.
Might be.
But we have to walk it together.
We do.
That's it for today's Deep Dive.
Until next time.